The alarm system stayed silent. No warnings flashed across the control panel. Everything looked normal, which made what David Ross saw through the viewport completely impossible. 3 years of hauling cargo between Saturn's moons and the asteroid belt taught him to trust his instruments over his eyes. Space played tricks on tired pilots. Reflections from ice particles created phantom shapes. Solar flares painted false colors across the black void. David learned to ignore these illusions years ago, but this shape moved. His freighter, the Wandering Star, cruised at standard velocity through empty space. The nearest asteroid field sat 2 days away. No other ships operated in this sector. David checked his route assignment that morning. He held the only active flight plan within 10 million miles. Yet something followed him. David leaned forward in his seat and squinted at the distant shape. The thing looked massive even from this distance. His brain struggled to process what his eyes reported. The shape resembled a snake, but snakes didn't swim through space. They didn't glow with soft blue and purple light. They definitely didn't stretch for what looked like hundreds of miles from head to tail. Iris, run a full sensor diagnostic, David said to his ship's artificial intelligence system. All sensors functioning within normal parameters. Iris replied in her calm, synthetic voice. No malfunctions detected. Then what am I looking at? Give me a visual analysis of the object at bearing 273. Distance approximately 2.3 million miles. A pause followed. Iris rarely paused. The AI processed information faster than any human could blink. When she finally spoke again, something in her tone sounded different, almost uncertain. Object confirmed. Mass readings are inconsistent. The object appears to be organic in nature. Length estimated at 412 miles. Width varies between 2 and 15 miles. The object is maintaining exact pace with our current velocity. David felt his mouth go dry. Organic? You mean alive? Insufficient data to confirm. However, the object displays characteristics consistent with biological life forms. Heat signature detected. Movement patterns suggest muscular propulsion. Captain, this object does not match any known species in my database. David's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. In 15 years of flying, he encountered plenty of strange things. Rogue asteroids that appeared from nowhere, equipment failures that nearly killed him, even a close pass by a comet that lit up his viewport like a fireworks display, but nothing alive. Nothing that moved with purpose through the vacuum of space. How long has it been following us? Unknown. The object appeared on long-range sensors 42 minutes ago. I did not alert you because initial readings suggested sensor malfunction. Further analysis confirmed the object's physical presence. David pulled up the rear camera feeds. The creature appeared on multiple screens now. With enhanced magnification, details became clearer and more disturbing. The thing had scales. Actual scales like a lizard or fish, but each one looked the size of a house. They caught starlight and reflected it in shifting patterns of bioluminescence. The creature's body undulated in smooth waves despite no atmosphere to swim through. Then David saw the wings. They spread from the creature's back in enormous sheets of translucent membrane. They didn't flap. Instead, they seemed to fold and unfold in ways that hurt to watch. Space itself bent around them, creating ripples in the stars behind the creature. The wings moved through more than 3 dimensions. Iris, prepare an emergency transmission to Earth control. Priority level maximum. Include all sensor data and visual recordings of this object. Preparing transmission now, Captain. I feel obligated to warn you that this report will sound unbelievable to ground control. I don't care how it sounds. Something impossible is following our ship through deep space. People need to know about this. David's fingers flew across the control panel, adjusting cameras and sensors to capture every possible angle of the creature. His scientific training never went beyond basic physics and navigation, but he understood the importance of documentation. Whatever this thing was, humanity needed to study it. The creature maintained its distance with eerie precision. 2.3 million miles. Not closer, not farther. It matched every course correction David made. When he slowed down, it slowed down. When he sped up, it adjusted its speed accordingly. Iris, does this thing seem curious to you? I am not programmed to interpret emotional states of unknown alien life forms, Captain. However, the object's behavior does suggest purposeful observation rather than random movement. David swallowed hard. Something massive and incomprehensible decided to observe his tiny cargo ship. The thought made him feel very small and very alone in the vast darkness of space. He reached for the communications panel to begin recording his verbal report. His hand froze halfway to the controls. The creature stopped moving. One moment it swam through space with fluid grace. The next moment it hung motionless against the stars like someone pressed a pause button on reality. Every undulation of its body ceased. The wings locked in mid-fold. Even the gentle pulse of its bioluminescent scales went still. Iris, did you see that? Confirmed. The object has achieved complete motionless state. Zero velocity relative to our position. Captain, this is highly unusual behavior. David's heart hammered in his chest. The silence in his ship suddenly felt oppressive. He could hear every hum of the engines, every breath he took, every beat of his pulse in his ears. Then the creature's head began to turn. The movement happened slowly, deliberately. The massive skull rotated on that long, serpentine neck. It turned until the creature faced directly toward David's ship. Even across millions of miles of empty space, David felt the weight of its gaze. The creature had eyes. Two enormous orbs that glowed with inner light. They fixed on the wandering star with unmistakable focus. Iris, tell me that thing can't actually see us from this distance. Unknown, Captain. However, the object's head orientation is pointed directly at our current position with an accuracy of 0.003 degrees. The statistical probability of this being coincidental is effectively zero. David's training told him to run, fire all thrusters and push his ship to maximum speed, put as much distance as possible between himself and this impossible creature. But something deeper, something instinctive told him running would be pointless. This thing crossed millions of miles of space. It could follow him anywhere. Besides, it wasn't moving anymore. It just watched. David touched the communications panel with shaking fingers. This is Captain David Ross of the cargo freighter Wandering Star. Current position in Sector 77 Alpha. I am transmitting an emergency report of first contact with an unknown alien life form. If anyone receives this message, you need to see what I'm seeing. This changes everything we thought we knew about life in space. He paused, staring at the frozen creature on his screens. And I think it's been waiting for something. I think it's been waiting for us. One moment David floated alone in space with that thing watching him from millions of miles away. The next moment his proximity alarm screamed as a massive vessel materialized directly alongside the wandering star. Not approached, not decelerated from high speed. Simply appeared as if it had been there all along. David nearly jumped out of his seat. Iris, what the hell was that? Vessel detected at close range. Configuration unknown. Technology unknown. Captain, this ship is not broadcasting any identification codes registered in human databases. Scanning for weapon systems. The communications panel lit up before Iris could complete her scan. A voice spoke in perfect English, though something about the pronunciation felt slightly wrong. Like someone who learned the language flawlessly, but never quite mastered the natural rhythm of human speech. Human vessel Wandering Star. This is Ambassador Ryan of the Galactic Council Rapid Response Division. Please maintain current position and refrain from any defensive actions. We are here to assist you. David stared at the communications panel. Galactic Council? He looked at the ship through his viewport. The vessel dwarfed his freighter. Smooth curves and organic shapes made it look grown rather than built. Soft green light pulsed along its surface in patterns that reminded him of breathing. Iris, please tell me I'm not having a mental breakdown. You are not experiencing any symptoms consistent with psychological distress, Captain. The vessel is real. The communication is real. The English language is real, though spoken with unusual phonetic patterns. I believe we are experiencing first contact with an alien intelligence. David's hands trembled as he reached for the communications controls. 15 years of cargo runs didn't prepare him for this moment. Nobody prepared him for this. Earth had been searching for alien life for centuries. The search came up empty every single time. Now, on a routine supply run, aliens contacted him like it was the most normal thing in the universe. This is Captain David Ross. Ambassador Ryan, how do you know English? How did you get here so fast? What's the Galactic Council? All excellent questions, Captain Ross. However, time is limited. The entity you observed has entered a stasis state. This gives us a narrow window to reach you safely. We are preparing to dock with your vessel. Please open your port airlock. Wait, hold on. I'm not opening anything until you give me some answers. What is that thing out there? Why is it following my ship? A different voice came through the speakers, deeper, rougher, with clicking sounds between words that suggested a throat not built for human language. Human, you do not understand the danger you are in. That creature is called a void serpent. The last time one appeared in this galaxy, 3 billion beings died. Open your airlock or we will force it open. David felt anger cut through his fear. You threaten me after asking for help? That's a great first impression. The original voice, Ambassador Ryan, spoke again with what sounded like a sigh. Please excuse Commander Trell. His species lost their homeworld's moon to a void serpent 800 years ago. He is understandably anxious. Captain Ross, I give you my word as a council ambassador that we mean you no harm. We simply need to speak with you in person about the situation you have witnessed. Time is critical. David looked at Iris's visual display of the council ship. Dozens of airlocks lined its hull, some already opened, extending docking tubes that reached toward his freighter like fingers. He could refuse and try to run, but these beings clearly possessed technology far beyond human capability. If they wanted to force their way inside, they would. Fine. Port airlock is opening now. But I want answers. Within minutes, 3 figures floated through his airlock into the Wandering Star's small cargo bay. David met them there, wearing his emergency spacesuit with the helmet retracted. He wanted protection but also wanted them to see his face. The first figure matched the name Ambassador Ryan. The alien stood roughly human height, but resembled a praying mantis more than a person. 4 arms folded against a thin torso covered in pale green chitin. The head was triangular with large multifaceted eyes that caught the light in rainbow patterns. When Ryan spoke, mandibles clicked around a surprisingly human-like mouth. Captain Ross, thank you for your cooperation. Allow me to introduce my companions. Commander Trell looked like evolution designed him for combat. Thick scales covered a body built like a wrestler. 2 legs, 2 arms. But the arms ended in hands that featured 4 fingers and 1 opposable thumb, each tipped with claws. His head was broad and flat with yellow eyes that tracked David with predatory focus. A tail swished behind him. The third figure surprised David most of all. She looked completely human. Asian features, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing a jumpsuit similar to David's own. She smiled and extended her hand. Dr. Yuna Lee, xenobiologist assigned to the Galactic Council. I'm from Earth, just like you. David shook her hand automatically, his mind reeling. You're human? How? When did Earth make contact with aliens? We didn't. Not officially. I was taken from Earth 20 years ago as part of the Council's developmental observation program. I've been studying alien biology and representing human interests in Council space ever since. Captain Ross, Earth has been under observation for the past 60 years. The Council has been waiting for humanity to reach a certain technological threshold before making official first contact. 60 years? David felt his anger returning. You've been watching us this whole time? Why didn't you introduce yourselves? Commander Trell's tail lashed. Because most species destroy themselves before they are ready for the truth of the galaxy. We wait. We watch. We intervene only when necessary. Today is necessary. Ambassador Ryan held up 2 of his 4 hands in a calming gesture. Commander. Trell is correct, though perhaps too blunt in his delivery. The Galactic Council represents 473 spacefaring civilizations across this galaxy. We maintain order, facilitate trade and communication, and protect younger species from threats they cannot comprehend. Your species showed promise, so we watched. We plan to make contact in approximately 15 more years, once humanity established sustainable colonies beyond your solar system. But then you saw the Void Serpent, Dr. Lee said softly. That changed everything. Captain Ross, do you understand how impossibly rare your sighting is? These creatures exist in the spaces between dimensions. They phase in and out of our reality. Most civilizations have only myth and legend about them. Confirmed sightings happen maybe once every 1,000 years. David thought about the creature hanging motionless in space, watching his ship. You said it's dangerous. You said 3 billion beings died. The Trell homeworld incident. Commander Trell spoke with barely controlled rage. A void serpent appeared near our system 800 years ago. Our fleets tried to communicate. The creature responded by phasing one of our moons partially into another dimension. When it phased back, the moon's orbit destabilized. It fell into our planet. 3 billion died in the impacts and resulting climate collapse. The serpent left without explanation. We don't believe the creature meant to cause harm, Ambassador Ryan added quickly. Analysis suggests it was testing our species' response to dimensional stress. The Trell responded with aggression, and the test escalated beyond anyone's control. Captain Ross, this is why your situation is so unprecedented. The Void Serpent followed your ship. It matched your every move. Then it stopped and turned to face you directly. Dr. Lee pulled up a holographic display from a device on her wrist. David saw recordings from various angles of the creature in space. Mathematical formulas and alien text scrolled beside the images. In every recorded encounter with void serpents, they never stop moving, she explained. They swim through space continuously, phasing between dimensions as they travel. Some xenobiologists believe they can't stop, that their biology requires constant motion to maintain dimensional stability. But this one stopped. For you. Why? David asked the question that had been burning in his mind since he saw the creature turn its head. Why me? I'm nobody. Just a cargo pilot hauling supplies between mining stations. What could possibly interest a creature like that in my ship? Ambassador Ryan's mandibles clicked in what might have been the alien equivalent of a grim smile. That is precisely what terrifies the Council, Captain Ross. We don't know. In all our centuries of observation and study, we have no record of a void serpent taking interest in any specific individual or vessel. They appear, they move, they disappear. They don't stop. They don't watch. They certainly don't wait. Commander Trell stepped closer to David, his yellow eyes intense. The Council's decision is simple. We evacuate you from this vessel immediately. We place experimental weapons on your ship and detonate it. The explosion will hopefully convince the serpent that you perished. Then we pray it loses interest and leaves this region of space. You want to destroy my ship? David felt his fists clench. That's your plan? Just blow it up and hope the monster gets bored? It's the safest option, Trell insisted. For you, for Earth, for this entire sector. Except it won't work. David surprised himself with the certainty in his voice. That thing followed me across millions of miles of space. It stopped and turned to look directly at my ship. Do you really think blowing up one small freighter will fool it? If it's interested in humans, destroying my ship just tells it we're scared. Dr. Lee looked at him with new respect. You're right. If the serpent is specifically interested in humanity, running or hiding won't help. Whatever drew its attention will still exist regardless of what happens to one ship or one pilot. Which is why we need to try something different, David said, though he couldn't believe the words coming from his own mouth. We need to make contact. Real contact. I need to go out there and meet that thing. Commander Trell's scales rippled with agitation. That is the most foolish suggestion I have ever heard from a human. Perhaps, Ambassador Ryan said thoughtfully. Or perhaps it is exactly the kind of evolutionary courage that attracted the void serpent in the first place. The shuttle looked barely big enough for 2 people and their equipment. Dr. Lee called it a scout vessel, designed for quick exploration missions in hostile environments. David called it a coffin with engines. Are you absolutely certain about this? Dr. Lee asked for the 5th time as they loaded supplies into the cramped cargo space. Once we launch, there's no quick way back. The journey to the serpent's position will take 4 days minimum, longer if the spatial distortions get worse. David secured the last equipment case and turned to face her. They both wore advanced spacesuits provided by the Council. The material felt impossibly light, yet supposedly could withstand temperatures from near absolute zero to several thousand degrees. The helmets contained communications equipment, air recycling systems, and visual displays that made his old emergency suit look like a toy. I've been certain about very few things in my life, David admitted, but I'm certain that running from this thing won't work. and I'm certain that if I don't at least try to understand what it wants, I'll regret it forever. Ambassador Ryan floated into the shuttle bay, moving gracefully in zero gravity. The mantis-like alien had been surprisingly supportive of David's plan, though Commander Trell still vocally opposed it. The council ship maintained position near the wandering star, sensors focused on the distant void serpent that continued its frozen vigil. The council has debated your proposal for the past 6 hours, Ryan explained. The vote concluded moments ago. You are authorized to attempt contact with the void serpent. However, we cannot provide direct support. If the creature reacts aggressively, we will be forced to retreat immediately. You and Dr. Lee will be on your own. Understood, David said, trying to sound braver than he felt. There is one more thing. Ryan extended one of his 4 hands, holding a small crystalline device. This is an emergency beacon. If you activate it, every council ship within 10 light years will detect your signal. However, using it also broadcasts your location to anything else sensitive to quantum communications. This includes the Void Serpent. Only activate it if you have no other options. David took the beacon and clipped it to his suit. The crystal felt warm against his chest even through the protective material. Dr. Lee finished her pre-flight checks and looked at David. Ready? No, let's go anyway. The shuttle separated from the council ship with barely a whisper of thrust. David watched through the viewport as the wandering star and the massive alien vessel shrank into the distance. Within minutes, they floated alone in the vast darkness of space with only the stars and that impossible creature waiting ahead. Iris, can you still hear me? David spoke into his suit's communication system. Static answered him for several seconds. Then his ship's AI responded, though her voice sounded distant and distorted. Yes, Captain. Signal strength is degrading due to distance and interference from the Void Serpent's dimensional presence. I will maintain communications as long as possible. The shuttle's AI had a different personality than Iris, more utilitarian, less conversational. It simply displayed navigation data and system status without commentary. David found himself missing Iris's calm, familiar voice already. Hours passed in uncomfortable silence. Space travel involved long periods of boredom punctuated by moments of terror, and this journey promised to deliver both in abundance. David tried to sleep but kept opening his eyes to check if the serpent had moved. It never did. Still frozen in space, still watching, still waiting. On the second day, the spatial distortions began. David, look at the navigation display. Dr. Lee called out from the pilot seat. The stars are shifting. David pulled himself forward and studied the readouts. She was right. The constellations visible through the viewport no longer matched the positions shown on the star charts. Some stars appeared duplicated, creating mirror images of themselves. Others vanished entirely, leaving gaps in familiar patterns. We're passing through the edge of the serpent's dimensional influence, Dr. Lee explained, though her voice carried uncertainty. Space itself is becoming unstable. The creature exists partially in other dimensions, and that presence creates ripples in our reality. Is it dangerous? Unknown. Council records suggest void serpents don't deliberately harm nearby objects, but the distortions themselves can be hazardous. Matter doesn't always behave predictably when dimensional boundaries become fluid. The shuttle shuddered suddenly. Alarms chirped across the control panel. David grabbed a handhold to steady himself. What was that? Dr. Lee's hands flew across the controls. Spatial warping. We just experienced localized time dilation. According to our instruments, we aged forward 3 seconds while the universe around us remained constant. The effect was minor, but it confirms we're entering more severe distortion zones. The next 2 days tested David's sanity. Time moved strangely inside the spatial distortions. Sometimes hours passed in what felt like minutes. Other times seconds stretched into subjective eternities. David would look away from the viewport, then look back to find the stars had rearranged themselves into completely different patterns. Worse were the visions. They started subtle. David would catch movement in his peripheral vision and turn to find nothing there. Then the movement became shapes. The shapes became people. Soon David saw his dead sister floating outside the shuttle, her face exactly as he remembered from her funeral 15 years ago. Don't look at them, Dr. Lee warned him. The dimensional boundaries are thin here. We're seeing through into other realities, other timelines. Those aren't really ghosts or illusions. They're real people from adjacent dimensions, and we're the ghosts in their reality. But ignoring the visions proved impossible. David saw his parents, both still alive back on Earth, but in these visions they looked ancient and sad. He saw versions of himself, some successful and happy, others broken and desperate. He saw Dr. Lee die in dozens of different ways, each more horrible than the last. Why is it showing us these things? David asked during what he thought was the third day, though time had become meaningless. It's not showing us anything, Dr. Lee replied. Her face looked pale and drawn. She'd been seeing visions too, though she refused to discuss what they contained. This is just what happens near the dimensional boundaries. We're seeing probability itself, all the ways our lives could have been, all the choices we didn't make, all the futures that didn't happen. The Void Serpent lives in this chaos constantly. The shuttle's AI interrupted with a calm announcement. Approaching target. Distance to object 500,000 miles. Time to arrival 6 hours. David pulled himself to the viewport and looked ahead. The Void Serpent had grown massive. Individual scales were clearly visible now, each one the size of a building. The creature's body stretched across his entire field of vision, blocking out the stars. The wings created prismatic effects that hurt his eyes, folding through dimensions that human perception couldn't fully process. And those eyes, those enormous glowing eyes fixed directly on their approaching shuttle. It knows we're coming, David whispered. It's known since we left, Dr. Lee said. The question is what it plans to do about it. The next 6 hours felt both endless and instantaneous. The shuttle drew closer to the Void Serpent until the creature filled every viewport. Up close, David realized his earlier estimates of size were absurdly wrong. The serpent wasn't hundreds of miles long. It was thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Measuring it became meaningless because parts of its body existed in dimensions where human concepts of distance didn't apply. Distance to object 1,000. The shuttle's AI announced. The serpent moved just its head, turning slightly to track their shuttle's approach. The movement created ripples in space that shook their tiny vessel. Alarms shrieked as the hull groaned under stresses it wasn't designed to handle. Dr. Lee fought with the controls, trying to stabilize their flight path. The dimensional warping is too severe. We can't get any closer without losing structural integrity. Then this is close enough. David opened the external communications channel. He had no idea if the creature could hear or understand human language, but he had to try. My name is David Ross. I'm a human from the planet Earth. You followed my ship across millions of miles. You stopped and watched. I came here to understand why. I came here to meet you. Silence answered him. The serpent's eyes glowed brighter, swirling with colors that existed nowhere in nature. David felt something touch his mind. Not words, not sounds. Pure information flooding directly into his consciousness. He saw Earth from space, but not through human eyes. He saw humanity's history compressed into seconds. The first humans leaving Africa. Civilizations rising and falling. Wars, art, science, love, hatred, all of it flowing past in a torrent of data. He saw humans spreading across their planet like a virus, adapting to every environment, surviving every disaster. Then he saw humanity reach for the stars. Primitive rockets giving way to fusion drives. Lunar colonies growing into cities. Mars being terraformed. Generation ships launching toward distant stars. Humans pushing into places where they had no right to survive, yet surviving anyway through sheer stubbornness and creativity. The information flood stopped as suddenly as it began. David gasped, clutching his head. Blood dripped from his nose, floating in zero gravity as tiny red spheres. David! Dr. Lee grabbed his shoulders. What happened? What did you see? It showed me us, David managed to say. It showed me humanity. Dr. Lee, it's not here to destroy us or test us. It's here because it recognized something in us. Something it hasn't seen in a very long time. The Void Serpent's body began moving again, but this time the movement was deliberate and purposeful. It curled around their shuttle without touching, creating a sphere of scaled flesh around their tiny vessel. The dimensional distortions intensified until David couldn't tell which direction was up anymore. Reality twisted. The shuttle remained intact, but everything outside the hull changed. The stars vanished. The familiar black of space disappeared. They floated in a place that existed between dimensions, a pocket of impossible geometry where the serpent's true form was visible. Where are we? Dr. Lee's voice shook with barely controlled panic. David stared through the viewport at the transformed landscape. I think we're about to find out what it really wants. The pocket dimension looked nothing like space. Colors existed here that David had no names for. Shapes formed and dissolved in patterns that made his brain hurt. Up and down became meaningless concepts. The shuttle floated in a space that seemed both infinitely vast and claustrophobically small. The void serpent uncoiled around them, revealing its true form. In normal space, David could only see the creature's physical projection. Here, in this between place, he saw all of it at once. The serpent existed in at least 6 dimensions simultaneously, its body extending through realities that overlapped and intersected in ways that defied human mathematics. Information flooded David's mind again, but more controlled this time. Less overwhelming. The serpent was learning to communicate in ways a human brain could process. Images formed in his consciousness. Not words, but concepts compressed into visual metaphors. He saw countless civilizations rising and falling, species that reached for the stars and failed, others that succeeded but destroyed themselves through war or hubris or simple carelessness. World after world, attempt after attempt, most ending in extinction or stagnation. Then he understood. The void serpents weren't predators or gods. They were guardians, observers, judges. "Dr. Lee, are you receiving this?" David asked, not taking his eyes off the creature outside. "Yes," she replied shakily. "It's in my head too. David, I think it's showing us its purpose. The serpents evaluate species for something called ascension. They look for races capable of evolving beyond their dimensional limitations." More images came. David saw species that passed the serpent's evaluation. They transcended their physical forms and joined some kind of collective that existed across all dimensions. But far more species failed. Those that failed were erased from reality itself, removed so completely that it was as if they never existed at all. This is a test, David realized with growing dread. We're being tested right now. And if we fail, humanity gets erased. The serpent projected a new concept: agreement. The pocket dimension shifted. The shuttle landed on something solid. Though solid was a relative term here. David and Dr. Lee exchanged glances through their helmets. "I think it wants us to go outside," Dr. Lee said. "Outside is a meaningless term in this place. But yes, I think you're right." They secured their equipment and opened the shuttle's airlock. The artificial gravity inside the ship gave way to the strange physics of the pocket dimension. David stepped out onto a surface that looked like crystallized starlight. The ground held firm under his boots despite appearing completely transparent. The void serpent's head lowered toward them, moving with surprising delicacy for something so massive. Those galaxy-sized eyes focused on the 2 tiny humans standing on the impossible ground. The creature's mouth opened, revealing dimensions folded inside dimensions. A new flood of information hit David. This time it came with a sense of purpose and structure. 3 tests, 3 challenges. Pass all 3 and humanity would be deemed worthy of ascension. Fail even one and they would be removed from existence. 3 challenges, Dr. Lee confirmed. Physical, mental, and spiritual. We have to pass all 3. Before David could respond, the pocket dimension changed again. The physical test, the ground beneath them transformed into a maze. Walls of crystalline energy rose up, blocking their view of the shuttle and the serpent. David's suit systems immediately registered environmental changes. The temperature dropped to nearly absolute 0. Gravity increased to 3 times Earth normal. The air composition inside his suit remained stable, but pressure warnings flashed across his helmet display. "The maze is changing the laws of physics as we move through it," Dr. Lee observed, studying her own readouts. "We need to find the center, but every section operates under different physical constants." They moved forward carefully. The first corridor looked straightforward until David tried to walk through it. Gravity reversed, pulling him toward the ceiling. He grabbed Dr. Lee's hand before he fell upward, and together they reoriented themselves to the new down direction. The next section had no gravity at all, but the walls radiated intense heat that made their suit's cooling systems scream in protest. David pulled emergency patches from his equipment pack and applied them to the suit's thermal regulators. "This is testing our adaptability," Dr. Lee said as they floated through the zero-gravity corridor. "Not just our knowledge of physics, but our ability to survive when physics doesn't work the way we expect." 3 hours passed navigating the maze. David used his experience, working in zero-gravity mining operations to jury-rig solutions when their equipment failed. Dr. Lee's scientific training helped them predict how Different sections might behave based on subtle visual cues. They reached the maze's center exhausted but alive. The crystalline walls dissolved, revealing the serpent watching them with what might have been approval. The mental test. The second test appeared as a puzzle suspended in the air before them. It looked like a three-dimensional mathematical equation, but the symbols made no sense. They shifted and changed even as David tried to read them. "These aren't Earth mathematics," Dr. Lee said, her voice filled with frustration. "The symbols represent concepts that don't exist in our physics. How are we supposed to solve something that operates on completely different universal constants?" David studied the puzzle. She was right. The equation used mathematics from a universe where physical laws work differently than Earth's. Trying to solve it using human knowledge would be impossible. "Then, we don't use human knowledge," David said slowly. "We use human intuition. That's not how math works. Maybe not in our universe. But this isn't our universe." David reached out and touched one of the symbols. It responded to his contact, shifting into a different form. "Dr. Lee, what if this isn't about finding the correct answer? What if it's about finding an answer that works, even if it shouldn't?" They spent hours manipulating the symbols, trying combinations that made no logical sense but felt right somehow. David pulled from his experience fixing broken equipment in space. Sometimes the technical manual solution didn't work, but some creative stupidity got the job done. Finally, after countless attempts, David arranged the symbols in a pattern that looked completely wrong mathematically, but created a kind of aesthetic balance. The symbols glowed, then dissolved into light. The serpent's presence in David's mind carried something new. Surprise? Amusement? The creature seemed impressed that they solved the puzzle through intuition rather than calculation. The spiritual test, the final test, proved the hardest. The pocket dimension vanished, replaced by an endless void. David and Dr. Lee floated in absolute nothingness. No stars, no ground, no reference points. Just black emptiness and the serpent's glowing eyes watching from the darkness. A question formed in David's mind. Not words. Pure meaning. Why should your species exist? The question carried weight that crushed David's chest. It wasn't philosophical. It was literal. The serpent wanted justification for humanity's continued existence in reality. What made humans worthy of the space they occupied? What right did they have to consume resources and expand across the stars? Dr. Lee spoke first, her voice small in the vast emptiness. "We create beauty. We make art and music and literature. We build civilizations and cultures. We search for meaning in a meaningless universe." The serpent's response came as a sensatio. Reality snapped back into focus with jarring suddenness. One moment David and Dr. Lee floated in the pocket dimension. The next, their shuttle hung in normal space with the council ship visible in the distance. Stars occupied their proper positions. Physics behaved normally. Everything looked exactly as they left it. "Did we actually leave?" David asked, checking his suit's chronometer. "How long were we gone?" Dr. Lee studied her instruments with a confused expression. "According to our shuttle's internal clock, we've been gone for 4 days. But according to the council ship's transmission timestamp, we've only been missing for 43 minutes. Time dilation from the dimensional pocket," David guessed. "We experienced days while only minutes passed out here." The communications panel crackled to life. Ambassador Ryan's voice carried obvious relief. "Wandering Star Shuttle, you have returned. We detected spatial distortions matching Void Serpent dimensional manipulation, followed by your sudden reappearance. What happened? Are you both unharmed?" "We're alive," David responded. "Ambassador, we need to return to your ship immediately. What we learned changes everything." "Agreed. Docking procedures are already underway. Captain Ross, I must warn you that the situation has become complicated during your absence. The Council is in emergency session regarding your contact with the Serpent." David and Dr. Lee exchanged concerned glances. Something in Ryan's tone suggested trouble. The docking process took 20 minutes. When they finally cycled through the airlock into the Council ship, they found Ambassador Ryan waiting with a security escort of 4 armed soldiers from various species. Commander Trell stood beside them, his scaled face twisted in an expression David had learned to recognize as anger. "What's with the armed welcome?" David asked, hand instinctively moving toward the emergency beacon still clipped to his suit. "Precautionary measures," Ryan replied, though his mandibles clicked nervously. "You returned bearing that." He pointed at the glowing scale embedded in David's chest plate. David looked down at the serpent's gift. Up close, the scale looked even more impressive. It pulsed with colors that shifted through spectrums visible and invisible. Strange patterns moved across its surface, almost like circuit diagrams or star maps. The serpent gave this to us, David explained. It's proof we passed their test. We made contact successfully. That scale is not merely proof, Commander Trell growled. Our sensors detect massive energy readings from that object. It is broadcasting signals across multiple dimensional frequencies. Captain Ross, that device has activated ancient technology throughout this entire sector. Dr. Lee pulled up a holographic display from her suit's computer. He's right. Look at these readings. The scale is emitting some kind of carrier wave. It's connecting to dormant systems that haven't been active in millions of years. Ryan gestured for them to follow. The security escort fell in behind as they moved through the ship's corridors toward what looked like an observation deck. Through the massive viewport, David saw something that made his breath catch. Space itself was changing. Massive structures materialized in the distance. Stations the size of moons appeared from nowhere, their surfaces covered in the same bioluminescent patterns as the void serpent's scales. Geometric shapes that hurt to look at hung in the void, clearly built using technology far beyond anything humans or the Council possessed. This started 17 minutes ago, Ryan explained. Ancient installations throughout this region are coming online. Automated defense systems, navigation beacons, terraform networks, and things we don't even have names for. All responding to the signal from your scale. More ships appeared on the sensors. David recognized the energy signatures from various Council species. Dozens of vessels converged on their position, clearly responding to the sudden activation of ancient technology. I need to brief the Council immediately, Ryan said. Captain Ross, Dr. Lee, please come with me. The assembly is waiting. They entered a massive chamber that looked like an amphitheater designed by alien architects. Holographic projections floated throughout the space, displaying various council members who couldn't attend in person. Physical representatives from dozens of species occupied seats arranged in circular tiers. At the center stood a raised platform where Ryan led David and Dr. Lee. The conversation stopped when they entered. Hundreds of eyes, compound and simple, natural and cybernetic, focused on the two humans and the glowing scale on David's chest. An elderly being that resembled a floating jellyfish spoke first. Its voice translated through implants into English. We are the Council Assembly. Captain David Ross, Dr. Una Lee. You stand before us bearing an artifact of the first builders. Explain how you came to possess this object. David spent the next hour describing everything that happened in the pocket dimension. The tests, the serpent's judgment, the revelation that void serpents evaluated species for worthiness. He explained how they passed by demonstrating humanity's stubborn persistence rather than claiming superiority. When he finished, the assembly erupted in debate. Species argued with each other in dozens of languages, all translated simultaneously by the Council's systems. David caught fragments of the discussion. Humans have existed in space for barely 3 centuries. They have not earned this inheritance. The serpent's judgment cannot be questioned regardless of our feelings. Those ancient systems give access to weapons that could destroy star systems. Commander Trell's voice cut through the chaos. I move that we confiscate the scale from the humans. It is too dangerous to remain in their possession. My species has worked for 50,000 years to master interstellar travel. Humanity should not receive advanced technology simply because a void serpent was amused by their arrogance. Ryan's mandibles clicked in agitation. Commander Trell, your personal feelings about humans cloud your judgment. The serpents built the ancient network. They have the right to choose who inherits it. Your objection is based on wounded pride, not logic. My objection is based on the safety of the galaxy. Trell roared. Give primitive species access to ancient weapons and you guarantee they will misuse them. Other representatives voiced similar concerns. David noticed a pattern emerging. Species that struggled for millennia to reach the stars resented humanity receiving what they saw as a shortcut, but younger species and those who remembered their own rapid advancement seemed more sympathetic. The debate continued for hours. David and Dr. Lee stood on the central platform, watching their fate being decided by beings from across the galaxy. The scale on David's chest continued pulsing, activating more ancient systems with each passing minute. Finally, a consensus began forming. The floating jellyfish elder spoke again. We cannot confiscate the scale. The serpents gave it to humanity for reasons we may not understand. However, we propose a compromise. Captain Ross will remain under Council supervision while we study the scale and its effects. We will work together with humanity to understand this inheritance before allowing unrestricted access. David was about to agree when Dr. Lee grabbed his arm. She pulled up her holographic display showing sensor readings that made her face go pale. David, look at this. The scale isn't just activating ancient technology, it's connecting to Earth's networks. Every human computer system with quantum processing capability is receiving the signal. The entire population of Earth can access whatever information this thing is broadcasting. David felt his blood run cold. The choice about humanity's inheritance wasn't just his to make anymore. The scale had already made the decision for him. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the council ship. Security forces rushed into the assembly chamber. A junior officer ran to Commander Trell and whispered urgently in his ear. Trell's face twisted with rage. A faction of the council has launched an attack on the humans' position. Multiple ships are converging on this location with weapons armed. Ambassador Ryan spun toward the main view screen. Who authorized this? No one authorized it, the jellyfish elder said grimly. This is a rogue action by council members who refuse to accept the serpent's judgment. They intend to seize the scale by force. Explosions rocked the council ship. David grabbed a support rail to keep from falling. Through the viewport, he saw ships firing on each other. The council was tearing itself apart over humanity's inheritance. Get to your shuttle, Ryan shouted at David and Dr. Lee. We will hold them off as long as possible. They ran through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting. More explosions shook the ship. David's training kicked in, his body moving on autopilot toward the docking bay. Dr. Lee kept pace beside him, her face set in determination. They reached the shuttle to find it still intact but surrounded by debris from other damaged vessels. David jumped into the pilot seat and began the launch sequence while Dr. Lee secured their equipment. Where do we go? Dr. Lee asked as the shuttle's engines powered up. We can't outrun council warships. David stared at the scale embedded in his chest. It pulsed faster now, almost urgently. Images flooded his mind, coordinates, a location. Something the scale wanted them to find. I know where we need to go, David said, his hands flying across the controls. The scale is showing me a path. The shuttle launched just as another explosion tore through the council ship's docking bay. David pushed the engines to maximum, dodging weapons fire and debris. Behind them, the battle intensified as more ships joined the fight. The scale projected coordinates directly into his brain. David followed them instinctively, his hands guiding the shuttle through maneuvers he didn't know he could perform. Space warped around them as the scale activated something in the shuttle's propulsion system. They weren't just moving fast. They were jumping, phasing through space the way the Void Serpent moved. Reality twisted. Stars blurred. Then they emerged in a region of space David didn't recognize. A massive structure filled the viewport. Not a station or a ship. Something else entirely. It looked like a space station and a living organism had merged together, creating a hybrid that existed across multiple dimensions. It stretched for millions of miles, a ring around empty space that pulsed with the same bioluminescence as the Void Serpent. What is that? Dr. Lee whispered. David checked his sensors and felt his heart stop. It's detecting life signs. Thousands of them. Dr. Lee, they're all human. That's impossible. Earth doesn't have the technology to build something like this. Humans have never traveled this far from Sol system. The scale in David's chest burned with sudden intensity. New information flooded his mind, and David understood with shocking clarity what they had found. They're from Earth's future, David said slowly. This is a closed time loop. Whatever decision we make here has already been made. These are humans from thousands of years in our future, and they've been waiting for us to arrive. The massive ring station dwarfed anything David had ever seen. As their shuttle approached, automated systems took control of their navigation. A docking bay opened in the station's side, large enough to accommodate vessels 100 times their shuttle's size. Should we trust this? Dr. Lee asked, her hand hovering over the emergency beacon. I don't think we have much choice, David replied, watching as their shuttle glided into the bay on autopilot. Besides, if they wanted to harm us, they wouldn't need to be subtle about it. The bay's atmosphere pressurized around them. David checked the readings and found air composition perfectly matched to Earth standard. Gravity generators activated, pulling them gently toward the deck. Everything about this place felt designed for humans. A welcoming committee waited outside the shuttle. 6 people in advanced spacesuits that made council technology look primitive. They stood in a formal line, hands clasped behind their backs in military precision. As David and Dr. Lee cycled through the airlock, the lead figure stepped forward and removed his helmet. The man looked roughly 40 years old with dark skin, gray-streaked hair, and eyes that carried the weight of difficult knowledge. He smiled warmly despite the obvious tension in his posture. "Captain David Ross, Dr. Una Lee, welcome to Sanctuary Station. My name is Admiral Peter Williams, commander of the Terran Temporal Research Division. We've been waiting for you for a very long time." David removed his own helmet, feeling the station's air on his face. It smelled recycled but clean. "Admiral, Dr. Lee said your life signs read as human. Are you from Earth?" "From Earth, yes." "From your Earth, no." Williams gestured for them to follow. "Please walk with us. We have much to discuss and very little time. The faction pursuing you from Council space will locate this station eventually." They walked through corridors that looked both familiar and alien. The architecture followed human design principles, but materials and construction methods came from technology, centuries beyond current capability. Holographic displays showed star maps, equations, and data that David's training couldn't fully comprehend. "How far in the future are you from?" Dr. Lee asked. "Approximately 10,000 years, another member of the welcoming committee answered. She was younger than Williams, perhaps 30, with Asian features that reminded David of Dr. Lee. "I'm Dr. Sarah Kim, lead xenotemporal physicist. The date in our frame of reference is the year 12,287 by the old Earth calendar. We're descendants of the civilization that humanity built after claiming the serpent's inheritance." They entered a massive observation chamber. Through the transparent walls, David saw the ring station's interior. A hollow space thousands of miles across contained what looked like a small solar system in miniature. Artificial planets orbited a contained star, connected by streams of light that might have been data or energy or both. "This is impossible," David breathed. "How did humans build this?" "We didn't," Williams said quietly. "The Void Serpents built it. This station is one of hundreds they constructed throughout the galaxy. Think of them as universities, designed to teach younger species how to transcend their limitations. When you received that scale, you triggered the activation protocols. This particular station responded to human genetic signatures." Dr. Kim pulled up holographic displays that showed the scale still embedded in David's chest. The scale is both a key and a teacher. It grants access to ancient technology and provides the knowledge necessary to use that technology safely. Every species that passes the Serpent's test receives one. What makes your situation unique is the timing. "What do you mean?" Dr. Lee asked. Williams' expression turned grave. "In our timeline, humanity received the scale approximately 300 years later than you did. By then, Earth had established stable colonies throughout the solar system. Political structures were mature. Humanity was ready for the responsibility. But in your timeline, something caused the Serpents to act early. You're not ready. And that lack of readiness cost everything." He gestured to the artificial planets orbiting inside the station. "What you're looking at are the last remnants of human civilization. Approximately 8,000 humans live on those worlds. We're all that's left." David felt his legs go weak. "What happened?" "We happened," Dr. Kim said bitterly. "When humanity received the inheritance in our timeline, the response was chaotic. Some nations tried to seize control. Others rejected the technology entirely. Wars broke out over access to the ancient systems. The fighting escalated rapidly because suddenly every faction had weapons capable of destroying planets." She pulled up historical records. David watched in horror as Earth burned. Cities vanished in dimensional rifts. Oceans boiled away under weapons that manipulated fundamental forces. The moon shattered into fragments. Mars colonies went dark. In less than 50 years, humanity tore itself apart. "The survivors fled to this station," Williams continued. "The ancient systems here protected us from the worst of the fighting. We've lived in exile for 9,000 years, studying the Serpent's technology, trying to understand where our ancestors went wrong. And then 3 years ago, we detected something impossible. A temporal anomaly originating from your exact position in spacetime." Dr. Kim expanded the holographic display. "The Void Serpents don't experience time the way we do. They exist across all moments simultaneously. When they gave you the scale, they created a closed time loop. Your choice echoes backward and forward through time, affecting both past and future. So we're living in a different timeline than you? David asked. No, Williams said firmly. There's only one timeline. But that timeline is flexible at certain junction points. Your moment right now is one of those junctions. The choice you make determines which version of the future becomes real. In one version, humanity destroys itself like we did. In another version, something different happens. The serpents sent you here to see our future, Dr. Lee realized. They want us to learn from your mistakes. Partially correct, Dr. Kim said. But they also gave you something we never received. Options. She manipulated the display to show the scale's structure in detail. In our timeline, the scale activated automatically once it entered Earth's orbit. Humanity had no choice about accepting the inheritance. The technology flooded global networks before anyone understood what was happening. But your scale is different. It's interactive. The serpents modified it specifically for your timeline. David looked down at the glowing scale on his chest. Modified it how? Watch. Dr. Kim touched her wrist device and the scale responded by projecting 3 holographic images in front of David. The first image showed Earth surrounded by active ancient stations. Humans using serpent technology to terraform worlds, build megastructures, and spread across the galaxy at incredible speed. But the image also showed conflict. Human factions fighting over resources and territory, pushing toward the same self-destruction that Williams described. The second image showed Earth dark and isolated. The ancient systems remained dormant. Humanity developed naturally, slowly, painfully, thousands of years of gradual progress without any shortcuts. Some colonies failed, some succeeded. But humanity survived and grew stronger through struggle. The third image showed something unexpected. Humans working alongside the void serpents themselves, not as masters and students but as partners. The ancient technology activated gradually under serpent guidance. Humans learned to build their own versions of the ancient systems rather than simply using what they inherited. 3 choices, Williams explained. Accept the inheritance immediately and risk repeating our mistakes. Reject the inheritance completely and develop naturally without external help, or choose the third path which didn't exist in our timeline. Partnership, David said, understanding flooding through him. The serpents are offering to teach us instead of just giving us the tools. Exactly. But the choice must be humanity's choice, not yours alone. The scale has already connected to Earth's networks. Every human with access to quantum communication technology can see these options right now. The decision belongs to all of humanity. Dr. Lee pulled up her own display, connecting to Earth's networks through the Council's communication relays. He's right. The scale's signal reached Earth 20 minutes ago. Global networks are flooded with the images. News agencies are broadcasting them. Government leaders are in emergency sessions. The entire planet is seeing what we're seeing. David felt the weight of 10,000 years of human future pressing down on him. How do we choose? You can't, Williams said gently. That's the point. No single human, no single government, no council or committee has the right to make this choice for everyone. The scale is waiting for a consensus. Not unanimous agreement, that would be impossible. But general consensus from a significant portion of humanity. That could take years, Dr. Lee protested. The council faction hunting us won't wait that long. Which brings us to why you needed to come here first, Dr. Kim said. Captain Ross, you're carrying more than just a key. The scale chose you specifically because of who you are. A cargo pilot, not a president or scientist or military leader. Just a regular person doing their job. The serpents sent a message by choosing you. Admiral Williams nodded. In our timeline, the inheritance went to world leaders and corporate powers. They fought over it immediately. But the serpents learned. This time they gave the key to someone without political ambitions or desire for power. Someone who represents ordinary humanity. David laughed bitterly. I'm not special. I'm just a pilot who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or the right place at the right time, Williams countered. Captain Ross, you need to return to Earth. You need to speak to your people directly. Not through governments or media filters. The scale will amplify your voice. Every human will hear you. What you say could determine which of those 3 futures becomes real. What am I supposed to say? I don't know what's best for humanity. Nobody does, Dr. Kim said softly. That's why it's not about finding the perfect answer. It's about letting humanity decide together. Your role is to facilitate that conversation, not control it. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Admiral Williams checked his command display and cursed. The Council faction found us. Multiple warships dropping out of FTL at the system's edge. We have maybe 20 minutes before they're in weapons range. We need to leave, Dr. Lee said urgently. Agreed. Williams led them back toward the docking bay at a run. Captain Ross, when you return to Earth, remember what you've seen here. Show them our failure. Give them the choice we never had. And whatever humanity decides, make sure they own that decision completely. They reached the shuttle as the station's defense systems activated. Massive weapons platforms emerged from the ring structure, ancient technology powering up to defend against the approaching fleet. David and Dr. Lee scrambled into the shuttle. As the engines fired up, David looked back at Admiral Williams standing in the bay. If humanity makes the right choice, does your timeline change? Do you get your Earth back? Williams smiled sadly. We don't know. Temporal mechanics aren't that simple. But if humanity in your timeline survives and thrives, then our 9,000 years of exile will have meant something. That's enough for us. The shuttle launched just as the Council ships opened fire. The station's shields held, buying them precious seconds. The scale in David's chest flared with brilliant light, and space warped around the shuttle. They jumped across thousands of light years in an instant, the ancient technology responding to David's desperate need to reach Earth. They emerged in lunar orbit. Earth hung before them, beautiful and fragile and completely unaware of how close it had come to annihilation. Iris, can you hear me? David called out. Yes, Captain. His ship's AI responded immediately. You have been gone for 5 days. Earth networks are in chaos. Everyone has seen the 3 choices. World leaders are demanding you return for questioning. Captain, what happened out there? Something incredible and terrifying, David replied. Iris, I need you to broadcast my voice on all human channels. Override everything if you have to. Every person on Earth needs to hear this. The scale pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. David felt it connecting to Earth's entire quantum network, amplifying his voice to reach every receiver on the planet and throughout human space. This is Captain David Ross, he began, his words reaching billions of people simultaneously. 5 days ago, I encountered something impossible. Now I'm offering humanity a choice. Not my choice, not any government's choice. Our collective choice as a species. He explained everything. The Void Serpent, the tests, the inheritance, and most importantly, the ruins of future humanity that took the easy path and paid with everything. The ancient technology is real, David continued. It could make us powerful beyond imagination. But power without wisdom leads to destruction. I've seen the proof, so now we choose together, all of us. Do we take the inheritance and risk destroying ourselves? Do we reject it and grow slowly but safely? Or do we ask the serpents to teach us to earn this inheritance through understanding, rather than simply claiming it? The scale projected the 3 images across every screen on Earth. Families gathered around devices, watching. Leaders paused their debates. Scientists stopped their experiments. For a brief moment, all of humanity focused on the same question. I don't know the right answer, David admitted. Nobody does. That's why we need to decide together. Talk to each other. Debate, argue. But make this choice as one species, not as divided nations or factions. Whatever we choose, we own the consequences. He paused, looking at Earth floating in the viewport. The scale is waiting. When consensus forms, when enough of us agree on a path forward, the ancient systems will respond. Take your time. Think carefully. Our entire future depends on this moment. David ended the broadcast. Silence filled the shuttle. Now what? Dr. Lee asked quietly. Now we wait and see if humanity is wise enough to choose correctly. Days passed. David and Dr. Lee remained in orbit, monitoring Earth's networks. The debate raged across the planet. Some demanded immediate access to the ancient technology. Others wanted nothing to do with it. But slowly, gradually, a pattern emerged. Younger generations gravitated toward the third option: partnership, learning, earning the inheritance through understanding. They saw the wisdom in not repeating the mistakes of the future humans David met. Scientists and engineers supported this path as well. The chance to work alongside the Void Serpents, to learn from beings who mastered dimensional physics, proved too valuable to ignore. Political leaders remained divided, but public pressure pushed them toward consensus. No single government could claim the inheritance for themselves now that all humanity knew the truth. 10 days after David's broadcast, the scale in his chest flared with brilliant light. Information flooded his mind. The consensus had formed. 73% of humanity chose the third path, partnership with the serpents. Gradual integration of ancient knowledge, learning rather than claiming. The void serpent appeared in Earth orbit without warning. Its massive form coiled around the moon, wings spreading across the space between worlds. Panic erupted briefly until the creature projected peaceful intentions directly into human minds. More serpents emerged throughout human space. Dozens of them, ancient teachers finally finding students worthy of their knowledge. They didn't bring finished technology. Instead, they brought problems for humans to solve, guides to point the way, and endless patience for a species that proved too stubborn to quit. Admiral Williams contacted David through quantum communication from Sanctuary Station. "We're detecting temporal fluctuations. The timeline is shifting. Captain Ross, I don't know if we'll still exist after this change completes, but thank you. You gave humanity the choice we never received." "Will your people survive?" David asked, unknown. "But if we don't, it means our timeline has been replaced by something better." "That's enough." The communication cut out. David never learned if the future humans survived the timeline shift. But he chose to believe they did, living now in a better future where humanity never destroyed itself. 10 years passed. David commanded a new class of human vessel. Not purely human engineering and not purely serpent biotechnology, but a fusion of both. Humanity learned to build their own versions of the ancient systems, guided by teachers who existed across dimensions. Earth thrived. Colonies spread throughout the solar system, but carefully, sustainably, with wisdom gained from nearly destroying themselves. The serpent's lessons emphasized balance and understanding over raw power. Dr. Lee served as Earth's first ambassador to the Serpent Collective, facilitating communication between species separated by millions of years of evolution. The Galactic Council reformed itself, with humanity serving as mediators. Younger species looked to humans as proof that the right choice at the right moment could change everything. David stood on his ship's observation deck, watching as human engineers worked alongside a young void serpent to construct the first human-built wormhole gate. The structure looked clumsy compared to ancient gates, but it was theirs. Built with human hands guided by serpent wisdom. "Captain, the gate test is ready," Iris announced. Her programming had evolved with serpent assistance, becoming something more than artificial intelligence but less than true consciousness. A perfect balance. Begin the test. The gate activated. Space folded. The artificial wormhole held stable, connecting Earth orbit to a distant star system. Humans cheered. The serpent watching over them made a sound like harmonious music expressing approval. David smiled. Humanity didn't inherit the galaxy. They were earning it. One stubborn, careful, wisdom-seeking step at a time. Through the viewport, dozens of void serpents swam through space around Earth. No longer mysterious threats, but ancient teachers who found students that understood the most important lesson. The journey matters more than the destination. The scale in David's chest, now a permanent part of him, pulsed with quiet satisfaction. The test was complete. Humanity passed not by being the strongest or smartest, but by being wise enough to admit they needed help and humble enough to accept it. David looked out at the stars and thought about all the other species out there, facing their own tests, making their own choices. He hoped they would be as fortunate as humanity. He hoped they would find the wisdom to choose partnership over power, but mostly, he hoped they would be stubborn enough to never give up, no matter how impossible the challenge seemed, because in the end, that's what being human meant, stubborn hope in the face of an impossible universe. And now, with teachers who understood that quality, humanity would carry that hope to the stars.